And on KNEB News today, we're talking with Chris Janicek, a Democratic Senate candidate coming up for 2020 for the nomination for the seat being currently held by U.S. Senator Ben Sasse. Chris, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you, Scott.
Introduce yourself to folks who may not know who you are and what you're all about.
My name is Chris Janicek, and I am running for the United States Senate, as Scott said, to defeat Ben Sasse, your current sitting senator. I am originally from David City, Nebraska, Butler County. Mom and Dad are from Bellwood, Nebraska, outside of Columbus. I reside in Omaha, Nebraska right now, where I'm a small business owner, and I've decided to change a little purpose in life and get involved in politics. I don't feel Nebraska is being represented by our current representative, so it's time to step up and do something.
Second run for political office?
Second run. I did get into the race against Deb Fischer back in February of 2018, and we had a really, really strong showing in the primary, and so we're back to finish the job.
Right now in the midst of a listening tour across the entire state of Nebraska, specifically here, since this Tuesday, coming up here on the 19th, you've got a public event.
Correct.
Which is taking place. Tell us a little bit about that.
That is going to be at El Torito Restaurant.
Okay.
We're having a listening tour where I'm going to listen to the people of Scottsbluff and the surrounding communities. I want to hear what's bothering you and what needs fixing, and I want to represent you and work for you in government.
So if it's a listening tour, what have you been hearing specifically as you've been moving across the state out to our area?
Right, since we've gotten to Scottsbluff, the three main concerns have been a little bit of the income inequality here and how we have to get wages up. We have a poverty issue in Scottsbluff. We have a lot of stores that are closing on the retail side, and another big concern is your airport. The runways need to be repaved, and it's a great economic tool for Scottsbluff that's not being addressed.
Okay.
And we talked with your city manager, and he has reached out to the current representatives of your area, and they've heard nothing back. Okay. So.
Yeah, an issue that has been on the burner for a little while.
Right. It needs to be addressed. It needs to be addressed immediately.
Yeah,
I mean,
with the administration.
Correct.
Sure.
Correct.
Now I understand agriculture. One of the topics that you've been discussing.
Yes.
As you've been moving across the state, specifically, with some of the tariffs and things that farmers are going through right now.
Right. The current administration and your representatives included have allowed these tariffs, these taxes, to almost decimate the farming community here in Nebraska, and this is something that has to be fixed. And people say to me, well, what's your plan? How do we fix it? Well, the first thing we do is remove the tariffs, and then we bring a farmer and a farmers union and the Chinese and our American government and our state representatives to a table, and we sit down and we talk this out and we figure out how to fix this problem, because the way we're handling it right now is not working, and it is affecting all of us. We are all one state. And so things that don't go on in Scottsbluff go on in Ogallala, and things that don't go on in Ogallala go on in Grand Island, and things that don't go on in Omaha go on in Scottsbluff. So we are one giant state, and it is my job to bring the people of this state together and to work for the better good for all of us.
So I guess one of the questions following up with that is, how do you get China, Mexico, Canada, the EU to deal fairly with American companies and American farmers then when it comes to sales overseas?
Well, that is where we have to sit down. We have to start negotiations, and we can't have it be my way or the highway, because we've got all these other entities in play. So rather than just upping and upping and upping tariffs, which are doing more damage to the people in Nebraska and across the country, we need to sit down and work with Mexico, work with Canada, work with China, and work with the other countries that are involved in our trade policies, rather than stating what we want done and not hearing what they need to have done either. I understand that we're at a disadvantage with a lot of these countries, but what we're doing right now is proven not to work, so it's time for Plan B.
Well, some would argue that even under NAFTA, we actually put ourselves at a disadvantage as time went on. Certainly there's not bad side to trying to get a better deal among everybody, correct?
Right, correct. Well, and NAFTA, which is for everyone out there, is the North American Free Trade Agreement, and it was basically a deal between Canada, the United States, and Mexico, North America, to have open trade policies. And there were a few inequities in there that need to be worked on. So now we have NAFTA 2.0, also known as the USCM agreement. But the reason that's being held up right now, because the Senate will not hear the proposals that the House of Representatives have made on how to fix this. And that boils down to a health care issue, where what was left out of that agreement was the price structuring of pharmaceutical drugs. And your House of Representatives is not going to let that go through with the current climate of how drugs are priced right now and hurting this country. And that has to be addressed, and there has to be caps put on those price gouges from these pharmaceutical companies that are already making billions of dollars in profits every year off of us.
And certainly there are a number of constituencies out there that would agree with that, especially among the elderly who
Correct.
are living on fixed incomes. There's a whole lot more to discuss here with Chris Janicek, a Democratic candidate for the Senate nomination to take on the Republican nominee for the Ben Sasse held seat in the U.S. Senate. And we'll be right back in just a moment. And we're back on KNEB, and we're talking with Chris Janicek, Democratic Senate candidate for the nomination for the seat currently held by U.S. Senator Ben Sasse. Again, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, Scott, for having me.
We've been talking a whole number of issues, farming being one of them. Going forward with some of the issues with ownership, as I understand.
Correct.
You're of the mind that people don't necessarily understand what happens when it comes to ownership is concerned.
Right now in Nebraska, and we came across this information a couple weeks ago with the Nebraska Farmers Union President, John Hanson. The amount of foreign ownership in Nebraska is almost staggering. It varies anywhere from 25 to 50%. I mean, the hog market is owned right now almost by 50% by a foreign company, and or foreigners. And what the most shocking thing is, it was the Chinese government that has infiltrated our markets and been able to buy up our hogs. They're also right now penetrating the soybean market. There are talks to take over Monfort Foods out of Colorado, Tyson poultry processing. And this is something I don't think a lot of people know. And we've got these tariffs that are restricting trade with our farmers right here in Nebraska. And the federal government, with the blessing of your state senators, has approved these bailout plans, these welfare plans for farmers. $12 billion in October of last year, another $18 billion in the spring of this year. And the majority of that money is going to two giant corporations that are owned by the Chinese government and the Brazilian government. Okay. 42% of payouts of those bailouts are going to these foreign-held companies, and not to the farmer that is suffering the most.
Okay. And what are those companies that
well, one of them is Smithfield Foods, okay, right here in Nebraska, and they have been acquired by the Chinese government, not even a Chinese corporation, the Chinese government. And the other one, I believe, is owned by the Brazilian government. I'm not sure what the name of it is, but it's two brothers that have weaseled their way into our economy and bought up a lot of our corporations, and they're receiving the direct benefit from the farm bailouts, and it's not going where it's needed to the farmer who actually produces the product that goes to market.
Okay. Let's pivot a little bit more about the Chris Janicek campaign in general. We had talked a little bit off air about how your campaign, your candidacy is not one of the far left. It's more middle of the road. Explain that a little bit.
Well, I'm more of a conservative Democrat. I base my campaign on the fact that I've had enough. We're done. We're not doing this anymore. We don't have representation in the state currently with Deb Fischer and Ben Sasse. Unfortunately, Deb Fischer won the last election. She's going to be with us 5 more years. We have a government and a representation in this state that doesn't care about us. The only time they show up and communicate with us is when they want our vote. The rest of the time we're disposable. So it's time to vote them out. Now, Republican ideas and Democratic ideas don't need to be brought to the table anymore. We need the right ideas. It's not about moving left, and it's not about moving right. It's about moving forward. It's about putting Nebraska back on the map. It's about unifying this state and working for the common good of all the people that live here. And that's my platform right now.
And let's talk about some of the specifics then, because one of the big things that's out there right now that you hear a lot about in the national media is health care for all. What's your stance on that?
We have a health care crisis in this country right now, and especially right here in Nebraska, and it affects everything from mental health to preventive health. We have a system where the insurance companies make these monster profits, and they don't care about the people they insure. We have a government program that's in force right now, the Affordable Health Care Act, which is being ignored, and there's nothing being fixed on it. We have employer-offered health care, which defines itself as a free market, which actually isn't free because you don't get to pick your plan, you don't get to pick your premium, you don't get to pick your deductible. That's all done by the negotiation contract between the employer and the actual insurance company. So it is a mess. Okay. So the issue isn't even health insurance, it's health care. Okay. And that's what we have to work on. And we have a plan for that. Our website, chrisforsenate2020.com. You can go look at the plan there if you'd like, or attend one of our meetings.
And your stance on the immigration issue that we have going on?
Immigration, we have an immigration issue at the border. We have laws that need to be reinforced. I am not for building a wall, but I am for border security. You know, I live here along with you and everyone else that I want to represent. And of course we want border security. We don't want drugs and sex trafficking and all this coming over our border. So we have to enforce the laws we have currently on the books, and we have to enhance and reform what's going on. And building a wall is not the way to do it. We've got $6.8 billion that's being pulled from the Pentagon right now for jobs and structural stuff, infrastructure that was already approved, taken away to build this wall. I'd like to see some of that money directed right here to your airport system out at the Scottsbluff Airport and the runways that need resurfacing. That's a huge economic engine for Scottsbluff when you get all these passengers and these planes landing here, and it's being ignored. And we're sick and tired of politicians who care more about money and special interests than they do about us, and it's time to vote them out.
Okay, and the one other topic that's out there, Second Amendment rights, and there's been a lot of talk of doing something with background checks, tightening up some of the loopholes that may be in there.
Right. We need to enforce the laws that are on the books. You know, no one wants to take the guns away. There are some Democrats that are running on that platform. We are not one of them. We are not represented by the National Democratic Party. This is Nebraska. Guns are a big hobby here. Hunting is a big hobby here. Everyone should be allowed to own a gun, protected under the Second Amendment. What we have to work on are laws that need to be enforced, and maybe some new ones that need to be reformed as far as restrictions on gun ownership, mental health checks, background checks, waiting periods, gun training and safety issues, and then the problem will solve itself. We got to keep the guns from getting into the wrong hands.
Of course, there's a whole lot more that's out there that we could talk with Chris about. Unfortunately, we're running out of time today, and we do thank you very much for joining us. Of course, Chris taking part in a listening tour that's making a public stop at El Torito coming up here on the 19th. At what time is that?
6 p.m. 6 p.m. Come on out.
6 p.m. at El Torito in Scottsbluff. You can meet Chris Janicek, talk with him about subjects that are on your mind, whether it's agriculture, whatever the topic may be. He'll be there to hear you out and take that out on the campaign trail. Chris, thank you very much for joining us on
Give me a
KNEB
handshake.
today.
Thank you, Scott.